Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is. Thanks for being with us here today. My name is Nim Grinvald, and you have joined the Kintone team for a Medium X Kintone workshop where we will be using the Kintone database, low-code, no-code digital workplace platform to post blog posts into medium.com. Folks, as you're joining us today, there are a few housekeeping items for us to attend to. The first is that we have slides and code available for us to launch off from. So please go ahead and click on this link to download the slides and then Git Clone the GitHub repository. You can also, your next step would be to get your Kintone subdomain by clicking on the link that you see in front of you or typing it into your browser. Make sure you use Chrome or Firefox to register for your Kintone subdomain. So to get started, we're going to set up our workshop's starting point. So please click on that publish to Medium repository in the link that we mentioned above. You're going to install the dependencies with a swift npm install command. And then you're going to install an npm module called Kintone Customize Uploader. And I'll explain what that does in a little bit, but it is a little useful piece of code that allows us to automate some migration behavior from our local machines onto Kintone on the web, onto your Kintone instance on the web. So to get your Kintone subdomain, you're going to make sure you're going to use Chrome or Firefox. Don't use Safari. Make sure that you've accepted cookies, and then you'll have the opportunity to create your licensed subdomain. So this is like, so when I say subdomain, you can think mydomain.kintone.com. My domain would be your subdomain. You can only use lowercase numbers or hyphens. So lowercase alphanumeric and hyphens. And that'll be your Kintone subdomain. Now, when you log in, your login name will be the value of your email address that you put in over there. And you're going to need to remember that subdomain because when you log into Kintone, you'll be putting in your subdomain.kintone.com. When you need help, first and foremost, you can post any questions in the chat at any time. And then we also have a debugging section, which handles, like it's an FAQ, it handles our frequently asked questions. That could be your first resource. Kick off our introductions. My name is Nim Grinvald. I am the technical evangelist here at Kintone. My job is to help folks like you understand how to use our platform and really like what's possible with it as a tool in your toolkit for the things that are important to you. I'm joined today by my colleagues Genji and Will, developer advocates out of the Tokyo office. I want you to know that the developer relations team, Genji and Will, and our other colleague Sean, they've worked very hard to put this together. These fellows have put in a lot of time and effort and attention to make sure that you get great quality learning and great quality resources from this, and it's an excellent learning experience for you. So if you feel like it is meeting or exceeding your standards, you've got them to thank for it. So today we are going to publish onto Medium by writing things in Kintone and then creating some code to push the things we write in Kintone onto Medium. It's going to look like this. What you're seeing in front of you first is Medium. This is your Medium account. If you don't have one, you can create one shortly. And what you're seeing now is Kintone. It's a Kintone record in what's called an app, which we'll get to shortly. And in that record, you've got some data. You pressed a button called push to Medium, which we'll see. Yep, there it is, published to Medium. And that all that data that we had in that Kintone record got published to Medium. Easy peasy. That's what we're doing today. The workshop will break down into three main themes. The first theme is our project setup. We've already started to do some of that with the housekeeping. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up our accounts and our tokens. And then we're going to set up the integration the code that's going to pipe data from Kintone into Medium. Okay, so if you have not already done so, open up your terminal, Git clone that repository that you see over here, this link to publish to Medium, and then npm install, and then do a global install for Kintone Customize Uploader. When you open up the repository in your favorite IDE, then you'll see the following. The directory structure will look like this. We've got a published to Medium folder, and it's got a source subfolder. And then that source subfolder has a requests subfolder. There's a whole lot of important code in there. The stuff that we're going to be touching today are the 3 files with the blinking stars, .env, customize manifest.json, and main.ts. That's right, TS, we're using TypeScript. If you are a JavaScript aficionado, then we are jazzing things up a little bit with TypeScript. If you're already familiar with TypeScript, great, you're going to be comfortable. And if you are learning TypeScript or you're open to learning TypeScript, I hope this is going to be a very valuable lesson for you in terms of how do you upgrade your JavaScript capabilities. At this point in time, I want to go over Kintone with you so that you know what tools we'll be using in this build and why we're using them. We're going to start with a high-level understanding of Kintone. Kintone's a no-code, low-code cloud platform. It's a digital workplace. It's a place. It also is a type of software known as groupware, and it allows team members to easily share and collaborate on their data. What's neat about Kintone is that in many of the solutions where folks work together, they've got all sorts of stuff in all sorts of places. You've got your files and whatever folders they're in. You've got the conversations about those files or that data or those records and databases. You've got that in emails and Slack messages and text message, many, many, many different places. The conversations are all over the place. So with Kintone, the data and the conversations about the data are all in one place. And so what's really nice about that, and I say really nice, it's an understatement. It's brilliant for people's experience of day-to-day work, is that when you put the conversation and the data together so that the context is tightly coupled, you don't spend time looking for stuff. Everything is exactly in the place where you talk about it, and it makes collaboration significantly easier. Okay. And it also makes it easier to handle processes and workflows. Things where you hand off one item to another person who manages this, to another person who manages that. You can imagine like expense reporting, legal document reviews, hiring processes. This is like operational stuff for every business. Even if you, no matter what job you're in, you still need to know how to submit expense reports. So this kind of thing makes it very easy to track who's doing what and when. So handling these kind of operations, and like major operations for your business unit, or even back of office operations, makes them a lot easier. The way that Kintone does that is by, you can imagine as like a platform for building what we call apps. An app you can think of as like a table in a database or a spreadsheet in a workbook, only it's more helpful. And data in an app is stored in records, right? What's nice about apps is that it's very easy to build them. You build them by dragging and dropping fields from a palette onto a canvas. And then if you've got the ability to do so, you can customize your app and integrations that Kintone is connected to with client-side executable JavaScript. So that means that you create a snippet of code or a large piece of code, and it runs in your Kintone environment on your machine in your browser, but pushed from your Kintone environment onto your machine, onto your browser, and it makes special things happen. What's nice about this setup is that it allows everyone to contribute. If you are allergic to code, or if you are just, it's not something that's fun for you, if you need to do it, you can do it quickly. You could do it in a way, like you can do something that wasn't possible for you before. It's now accessible to you in the first place. If you love this stuff and you're good at it, you can do it significantly faster than you did it before. And you also have the ability to make it even better with your custom code. And that's pretty awesome. So what that enables is the promise of groupware, right? Ultimately, when we're working together as a team, we've got data, we want to get insights on that data, and then we want to be able to share insights on that data so that we can iterate on what we learned and execute on it. We can operationalize those insights quickly. So that's the promise of groupware, and that's what we're able to do with this kind of a setup. What does that mean for you as a developer? So as a developer, there are a few ways where you can contribute, and one is what we call the command center approach. So this is where you start off with an environment like Kintone, and you might have other third-party applications that your team is using, and you can plug those applications into Kintone and have everybody work off of Kintone as like a base, like a collaboration layer that sits on that hoovers up data elsewhere that people use to make business decisions and collaborate on their decision-making processes. You can build those pipes into Kintone and create a custom look and feel. Another thing that you could do is enhance the platform with specific customizations. So Kintone's got its native functionality, and then there's all the extra stuff that you can build if you want to tweak it one way or the other. So you can hack Kintone to extend its capabilities. For that to happen, we need developers to build those JavaScript extensions. Inside Kintone, what you can do to make that happen is use our Open REST API or our JavaScript API. We've got API tokens that enable you to securely access your Kintone data from an external resource. Webhooks that allow you to push Kintone data to some other REST API endpoint, as well as customizing with CSS, HTML, plugins, which you can imagine as like Chrome extensions. They're like packaged code that can extend the platform. And then there's permission controls as well. When we talked about custom look and feel, I wasn't joking. There's a lot of power that we can use. So we can display data with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. On the left-hand side of the page, you can see like a bubble chart view. This is custom made. And on the right-hand side, we've got somebody playing a Space Invaders game. I believe Will is responsible for this wonderful bit of code running Space Invaders in Kintone, for which all of us are eternally grateful. This is something that you can run in Kintone. So if you're looking to learn things by yourself, you can use Kintone as a safe place to play with JavaScript. You can write about what you learned in tech blogs, and then you can share your projects with the community. If you are looking to use Kintone as a place to generate revenue, you can create and sell Kintone extensions. You can consult with firms on achieving their business goals using Kintone, and then you can also develop Kintone customizations for customers. So that's enough background. At this point in time, let's jump in and create a Kintone app. We're going to go through it step by step. Step one, check your email. Right? You should have received an email that instructs you on how to activate your developer license and log into your subdomain. And once you do, you'll be told to set an initial password and then log in, and you will see this screen. So I want you to raise your hand at this point if you have seen this screen and have gone past it, or if you are on this screen. I want to get a sense of where everybody is so I can do a quick check-in to make sure if we need to catch anybody up, we do that. Okay? So please raise your hand if you are on this screen or have passed it. So John, I saw your hand go up. Mansuk, your hand went up. Great. I believe Yesha, how are you doing? Ruatsu, thank you. Thank you. Yesha, okay, great. All right, we're gonna go ahead and proceed. And so right now, what you see if you are on the page that I'm displaying in the slideshow, this is the portal. This is the first real actionable page that you log on, that you can see when you get into Kintone. And what you see on this page is a canvas, really. This is sort of like this is the equivalent of like a blank, like when you're painting something, you start with a blank canvas. That's actually what we're seeing over here. Now, when this all gets filled out, we've got places for people to communicate and organize their data. Those are called spaces. You've got lists of apps, which are the record buckets where you're keeping your data. And then there's this announcement segment, which you can customize. You can configure with filtered lists or links, stuff that's important for you to see front and center. But for now, this is a blank canvas, and that's exactly what we would expect because it's a brand new subdomain. The first thing that we're going to do is create our first app from scratch, and we're going to do it by clicking on that plus sign in the apps panel. When we do, we'll be taken to a page called the Kintone Marketplace, okay? And in the Kintone Marketplace, what we're going to do is we're going to click on this button called Create App from Scratch. Create App from Scratch because we're going to build something from scratch. Once you've clicked Create an App from Scratch, you'll be taken to the canvas for the app. See, this is the place where we're going to start designing an app. And designing an app is basically like building a form. And that makes sense, right? Like a database. If we're going to be like putting data into a database, and each piece of data is its own record, then we need some kind of a page where we can input that information, which is a form. So we're killing a whole bunch of birds at once when we build a database schema by dragging and dropping fields to build a form. It's quite brilliant. And so what we're going to do over here, before we do any dragging and dropping, is we're going to change the name of this app. It says new app over here. We're going to change it to publish to Medium. Once we do that, we'll start to dragging and dropping. There are 3 fields that we want to drag and drop. The first is a text field. It's the field that you see at the top right of the columns. On the left-hand side of the page, there are 2 columns. At the top of the rightmost column, at the left-hand side of the page, drag and drop that text field. And then immediately underneath it, drag and drop that text area field. And then on the left-hand column, about a halfway down the page, approximately, you will grab the blank space. And you can put them in together in this order. We recommend the blank space on top, text immediately below that, and the text area immediately below the text field. We're going to tweak our fields. We're going to change the name of them so that they're easier to work with on our front end. And we're going to change the field code of them. The field code is like the secret name we use in our code to get, it's like the secret unique identifier of every single field that we use in the code to guarantee that we're referring to the field that we expect to refer to. In other words, it's the unique identifier for a field. Let's start with the text field settings. Hover over the text field and click on settings in that gear wheel at the top right. You'll be taken to the settings for the text field. And I want you to make 2 changes over here. The name, please change the name from text to title. And then on the bottom, you'll see field code, change that to title. And folks, this part's really important. Make sure that title is case sensitive. It's all lowercase, okay? From here, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the text area field. We'll change the name to body, and we'll change the field code to body, all lowercase. Again, this field code is case sensitive, so make sure body is spelled all lowercase. And then finally, we are going to make changes to the blank space field. Hover over that blank space field until you see that gear wheel, hover over that gear wheel and click Settings. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change the value of the element ID. The element ID will be called published to medium. And this is also case sensitive. It'll be in camel case. So publish will be lower, the P in publish will be lowercase, the T in to will be uppercase, and the M in medium will also be uppercase. When we're done, our app will look as follows. We'll have changed the name to publish to medium. We will have pulled out 3 fields. We will have adjusted the settings of those 3 fields so that they say title and body, and then we will have changed the field code of all of these 3 fields as well. Once we're done with that, please click on the blue button at the top right side of the screen, and it'll say either activate app or update app, and that will push our changes to production. So what you'll do is you'll click on that activate app or update app button, and you'll push your changes to production. Once you've done that, you'll land on our app, on the user-facing side of our app. See, we spent all this time building the app and essentially in the administration settings, and now what we're seeing is a table in a database or a spreadsheet in a workbook, but it's empty, which is exactly what we expect. We don't have any data in it. We just spent all of this time building the schema. So folks, if you've got into this stage, we're going to go ahead and click on the plus sign to create your first Kintone record. Okay, awesome. We'll keep moving. Let's get to the fun part. We're going to connect Kintone to the project, okay? And so there are a few stages. The first is we need to, in our code, handle the passing of data from our local environment to our Kintone environment. And so we need to be able to put in our login credentials safely to pass that data up to the cloud. The second is well, actually, all of these steps are involved in handling the relationship between your local machine and pushing data up to Kintone, and also pushing Kintone data into Medium. So this is what we're going to do first, okay? In your code, okay, you'll see we've got a whole lot of action over here. Okay, we're going to go to the .env.example file. Okay, this .env.example file is a way to make sure that our environmental variables are correctly enumerated and configured, so that if you're grabbing a code from a remote location like GitHub, that you can get the code and you can look at the environmental variables and you know what you need to put in without the person who uploaded that code onto GitHub exposing their own credentials. And so you'll see there are 5 bits of information that we're going to need. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this .env.example file. Now you'll see in the example I have, so we've got .env, copy.example, get rid of copy.example. We just want to have it be called .env.env. And you'll see I've got some dummy data in here, okay? This is just a reference for you to use. This is not usable data. But what you're going to need is you're going to need to put in your Kintone URL. That'll include your subdomain. So whatever your subdomain was that you created on Kintone, that's what you're going to put in right where I put in the words subdomain, okay? For me, it's dev events, And if you forgot what your subdomain is already, not a problem. Inside Kintone, you can look at your browser URL and you'll see whatever the value is of your subdomain, and it'll be right between the last slash of HTTPS and the dot of Kintone. Okay. And then you're going to need your Kintone username. Now yours will probably be the email address that you used. But like if you already changed this and you were messing around, then it'll be whatever the name is over here. So for me, for example, it's developer. Now, if you can use quotes, you don't need to use quotes. It doesn't matter in your .env file. I'm going to stick with using quotes. And then you'll put your password in here, whatever your password is. Okay, and then we'll get to these author ID and API token in just a moment. You'll see these two environmental variables. One is called VITE author ID. The other is called VITE API token. And I just want to preface that we're going to get these, and it's going to take us a few moments. And the values that we'll get will look like these strings, but will actually be like quite a bit longer, maybe around that size, I don't know, 50 characters or so. I don't know exactly. They're quite long. Okay. Now you might wonder, what is VITE? VITE is a tool that we are using under the hood to manage the building of our file from TypeScript to browser executable JavaScript. VITE is similar to a tool you may have already encountered in the wild called Webpack, which used additional tooling like a sub-tool called Babel to handle the transcompilation, a fancy word for saying the translation of whatever version of JavaScript or TypeScript you were using into whatever is the most browser compatible version that you chose. Okay. So VITE is essentially a Webpack replacement, and VITE has a strange quirk and it also handles the assignment of environmental variables. And VITE has a strange quirk where for any environmental variable that you are using inside of your source code, you need to preface that environmental variable with a VITE underscore. This Kintone-based URL, Kintone username, and Kintone password will actually be running in your console, in your terminal, or in your command prompt, whatever language you have for that. So we don't, because they're not being run in they're not being executed in our source code, we don't need to preface them with the prefix VITE. So that explains why these values are named, why these keys are named the way that they are. Let's get the values. So how do you get the API token? Well, what I'd like you to do is to sign into Medium. If you haven't already created a Medium account, you can go ahead and do that. If you have, great, go ahead and sign in. You can sign in using Google if you don't have a problem using Google as your authentication gateway. There are a few other ones as well. Use whatever you like. The important point is when you sign into Medium, we're going to go into our settings, okay? And in our settings, we're going to click on the bottom left-hand corner of the page, and then click on Settings. And from here, what we're looking for is Integration Token, okay? So you're going to click on a button called Get Integration Token. And you'll describe it, you'll say, Kintone X Medium Workshop. And you'll click on Get Integration Token. And it'll come up with a very long string, which you will put in the VITE API token. The VITE API token will contain your integration token. So we will get to your author ID, but right now we want your VITE API token to be the value of whatever your integration token is. So then it'll look something like this long string. And now we're going to get the author ID. So we're going to run a command in your command prompt. And it's a curl command. So what you're going to need two things. The first is you're going to need this curl command. And conveniently enough, we've got it ready for you in curl_author_id.txt. What you'll do is you're going to grab the integration token that you put in, oops, nope, that's my env.example, sorry about that. You'll put your, whatever you put as your VITE API token, you're going to copy that, and you're going to put it, you're going to overwrite this segment of the curl command, my API token, with the value of your API token. And then you're going to copy this whole bit and paste it and run it in your terminal. And when you do, the command will look something like this example. And the result will look something like this result. You're going to need that ID. Remember, it's quite long. Okay? You will save it as your author ID, your author ID. Okay? So your password is private. Your API token, you've got it, it's private. Your author ID, that you're going to get it from running that curl command, and then grabbing the value of the key called ID in this object.
Had someone run into the error bash JSON pp command not found? In that case, you can run the curl command without the pipe in JSON pp. The JSON pp part, it just formats the text in a cleaner way so that you can read it. Just removing it will just return the result in a little untidier version, but you can still find your author ID.
Quintessential understatement. If you don't have the JSON pp command, all of your objects will be jammed together and just like this block of text that's annoying to read. And you'll need to hunt for the part that says ID : and then everything between that, everything between those two quotes is what you'll want. From here, what we're going to do is we've got a few more changes to make to have all of this automatic uploading work the way that we want. What we need to do is we're going to take a JavaScript file, or in this case, we're going to take a JavaScript file, and magic will happen behind the scenes once we build our TypeScript into JavaScript. There will be a tool called Kintone Customize Uploader that will grab that newly built JavaScript file and will send it into Kintone. But it doesn't just go into this amorphous Kintone whatever, it goes into the specific app that we just made. Now, if we've got more than one app or hundreds of apps or however many apps, we need to specify to Kintone Customize Uploader, what is this specific app where we will execute this special code? And so we need to define that, that unique app, and we do that with an app ID. The app ID can be found inside of Kintone when you're on the list view. So you should have a few pieces of dummy data over here. So let's say, curled. This is the body. And so you'll see a page that will look like our app. We're looking for the number after the k/. For me, it's 41. For you, if you've never used Kintone before and you just built your first app, it's going to be the number 1. But it might not. You may have built some other apps and forgot about them. Whatever the case is, whatever that number is for you, that's your app ID. Okay? What you're going to do is you're going to copy that number. And if you're inside of a record, it's okay. You'll also see it immediately after the K. There will just be some other stuff over there that we can ignore. Okay? What's important to you is you want to grab that app ID, and then in the file called customize-manifest, change your app ID to whatever that you need it to. Now, let's explore the code. We did all of this setup. It's quite exciting. Let's get to the heart of the matter. What we're going to do is we're going to create a post body inside of our main file. We'll create a button that'll render in our Kintone app, and then when we click on that button, the data will post to Medium. Okay? Let's dive in. The file that we're going to be working with is called main.ts. And if you've never worked in TypeScript before, the first thing I want to let you know is that TypeScript is JavaScript with extra glitter. Okay? So if you're comfortable, if you have some level of comfort with JavaScript, all we're going to do is stretch that a little bit. We're going to give you some more tools in the toolkit. Typekit is not some completely different language. And so as we're going through this file, you might see some things that are familiar. You might see some things that are unfamiliar, but that seem familiar were it not for a few tweaks. We'll explain what those tweaks are so that you can have like a comfortable introduction to TypeScript. I should start by by sharing what is TypeScript, right? So whenever we're doing programming, for all intents and purposes, when we're doing programming, we're building functions and we want the functions to do stuff. Every function takes an input. Some functions spit out an output. Actually, that's not true. Some functions take an input, some functions take an output. And what we do is we compose functions together. We graft them into a pipe onto each other many times so that the output of one function is used as the input of another function, the output of which is used as the input of another function. And so we're transforming data along a pipe. Now, that's great. That's like programming as plumbing 101. But you may have encountered times where things go awry, where the outputs of one function don't pipe nicely into the inputs of another because that second function was expecting a different type of input. Let me give you a simple example. If I'm going to run a function that's going to sort names by last name, right? It would be appropriate to expect my input would be one name or a list of names, or maybe even no name, right? Like nothing or an empty list. It would be weird to handle numbers. Oh yes, Will's last name is 42. Well, no, that's not how things work. So we want to have guardrails around our functions so that we can make sure, without needing to execute any code, that the types of data that we're passing into and out of our functions match our expectations. TypeScript is almost entirely designed to handle that problem. And the reason why it's so important is because this is a rich area for bugs, is in the handling, is when types go awry, right? Oh, I didn't realize this function could possibly pass undefined in as a parameter into this other function. This second function has no way to handle undefined. Things will break and explode. And obviously we don't want it. So what TypeScript lets us do is, without executing any code, we can check to see if the inputs are appropriately typed to the outputs of a different function. And that's a beautiful thing. Now, it's not just primitives like strings and numbers that get handled as types, but also arrays and objects, right? An array of strings could be handled as a different type than an array of numbers. And then we have these things called objects, which have a particular expected shape to them. So wouldn't we want to make sure if we're passing objects down in functional pipeline that the shape of an object is typed along the way so that we can make sure that we are getting the expected behavior? Well, TypeScript handles that too. And so as we go through this code, I will point out a few places where we have used TypeScript to define or declare our types. Here we go. The first thing that we're going to do is we see we're importing some CSS and we're importing the post to medium function from the post API TypeScript file. We don't need to worry about that right now for the moment, although I encourage you to check out that file if you've got some extra time and sit within and figure out how it works. The reason why we're getting an error thrown over here is because it's declared, but the value is never read. Hint, hint, we are going to use this function later and we will be putting it in. All right, well then the first thing we see after these import statements are these interface declarations. And this is not JavaScript, this is TypeScript. What we've done is we've created a type called event. We've created another type called post body, and the event type and the post body type are objects with the following shape. An app ID is included, that property is included, and it's a number. Record ID is included, and that's a number, and the record property is included, and the value of that property is going to be any one of the following values from kintone.fieldtypes.customfields. You don't know what that is. I don't expect you to know what that is at the moment. We'll come back to it. Let's just set it aside at the moment and just acknowledge that there's something happening elsewhere that's feeding us information here. Likewise with post body, okay? When I am posting to my Medium API, I for sure want a string, or it could be a null. It could be that we weren't putting it in. It could be the content format could be a string or a null value. And the same thing with these other properties. What we're telling TypeScript is these are the following properties on the object these are the following properties on an object that we have typed as the post body type. Those properties exist, and the values of those properties will be the following types of values: string or null, array of strings or null, boolean or null. Now, typically, we don't actually want the null over here. The null, we in this workshop are using null to clarify for you, the audience members, what will need our attention so that it's not ambiguous. You know, somebody on our team deliberately wrote null over there so that you know we need to attend to that area. When there are 0 nulls left in your code, we're in a good place. If our coding is finished, we should be left with no nulls. So from here, so we've defined these particular object shapes, and we've defined 2 of them, the event and the post body types. And now what we're going to do is we're going to run some code. Okay, well, this looks a little familiar. This function expression is called an immediately invoked function expression. And what it does is it tells our executor that our browser engine that when you get to this function, as soon as you're done reading it, execute it, run it. Now, what's going to be in it? Well, I suppose a good question is like, where does this code get executed? Well, let's go back to our Kintone environment. Now, what I'm expecting is inside of my record with my body of my Medium blog post, I'm expecting a button over here. Some button, it's not there. But on this page is where I should execute the code. This is called the record detail page. And so what we need to say is that when I am on the record detail page, do the following stuff. And so that's exactly what we see over here, where on an event called app.record.detail.show, which is Kintone's own internal event engine, kicks off this event whenever we have rendered the detail page, do a bunch of stuff. What's that stuff? Well, it's all in here and we'll go through it. What you should note is that the callback function for doing stuff in this event, it passes in an event parameter. This is by Kintone design. When we want to do stuff at certain points in when a Kintone page shows up, we want to expose certain properties sometimes, and so we use the event object for that. The event object, you might wonder, what does it look like? And we got you. In fact, TypeScript's got you. That event object that gets passed in that Kintone passes in as a parameter for us to use in our callback code, it has the following properties to it. And this is where TypeScript gets really useful. Because if you didn't have this here, you would need to execute some code on Kintone to figure out what the heck is this event stuff. We don't need to do that. Right now, we see that the event object has the following shape. It's got 3 properties on it: app ID, record ID, and record. And there will be typed accordingly. Now, there may be some additional properties on the event object, and in fact there are, but these are the ones that are important to us. The other ones don't matter. And so you can understand that this list is not, the way that we're running TypeScript, this is not an all-inclusive list of properties on that object and on that type, and we don't need it to be. Okay, so when we get onto this detail page, let's figure what should we expect to have happen, right? We should expect a button to show up. We should expect that button to say on it, like post to Medium. We should expect that when we click on that button, we will gather up that data and we will post it to the appropriate API endpoint over there on Medium. That's what we should, that's the behavior we should expect. Let's see how we do. Okay. Well, I'm seeing a few things over here in the body of this event callback. And the first is that we are defining a post body. Great. We're going to need that because when we send the data over to medium.com, we're going to do it in a post API call, and that post API call will expect a body. That's great. We're defining it right over here. How wonderful. And we're going to create a button. That's exactly what we're expecting. And then we're going to say, do stuff. We're going to define how that button looks. We're going to define what happens when we click on that button. And then this line of code over here tells us that to put that button in the place where we expect where that blank space field is. All right, so let's walk this back. And actually, the place that I'd like to start is with our button. Let's start with our button. Okay, so on our button, let's take a quick look. Hang on a moment. So on our button, what should we expect? Well, the button ID, okay, do you remember we talked about the field code of the different fields? This is where we will put the field code of that blank space field. And if you followed along with us, the value of that field code was published to Medium. Now you might wonder, okay, what's a class name? Well, class name is going to refer to a specific CSS class. We have a CSS class called upload button that's going to make things pretty. That's what we're going to refer to over here. So in main.ts, we're going to refer to a class name called upload button. So far, so good. And then our inner HTML, this is what the text that will be written on the inside of the button. And so we might say like, click me, or click me to publish, or we might say publish to Medium. Whatever you want over here, this is free for you to make your own. Okay, so far so good. And what else do we want to do? We want to then, when you click on the button, we want to be able to call our post request function. We want to do it with the body that we will define shortly. So what function do we have available to post to Medium? Well, that function is called, conveniently enough, post to Medium. We imported it from a separate file called post API, where we exported this function called post to Medium. Okay, so we're going to post to Medium on click. And what exactly are we going to post? Let's take a look at this function. This function is going to take in a parameter called a post body. For those of you who use JavaScript, you will have expected that it should just say post body. You might be wondering, what is this colon and everything after it? And actually, that's TypeScript. That's TypeScript typecasting that parameter. So we should expect post body to be an object. And if it's not an object, TypeScript will throw us an error and it'll say, hey, wait a minute, you're not even allowed to run this thing until you fix this issue, which is that the post to Medium function is expecting an object, but actually you've passed in a parameter whose value is not an object. And that will bring us back to our post to Medium function, which, remember, it takes in a post body. And the only post body that we have is called body, which is a variable typecast as the post body object shape. Okay, so now let's work on post body. We're going to need values. We're going to need to put in the source of these values for each one of these 6 different properties on this post body object that we will be sending to Medium. So let me start with the easy ones. Okay, are we going to notify followers after we publish? Well, this is a Boolean, and we know that it's a Boolean because it said so up here. And actually, if we got rid of null, we could see that we would be throwing an error over here that we have a null value, but it must be, but the value must be Boolean. So the value we're going to have is false. So you see we're handling 2 different levels of declaration in our script. We're handling the type of value, and we're handling the value itself. Okay, now publish status. Status of our article can be public, draft, or unlisted. It's not going to be null. So let's make it public, which, right, that expects a string, no problem over here. Okay, what about tags? Well, tags is expecting an array of strings. It actually does, it shouldn't expect a null. That was just for our placeholder purposes. So now let's give it an array of strings. So what are the tags that we could put for the article? Well, Kintone can be a tag, Medium can be a tag, and let's use low code as a tag as well. This is optional. We're including it. Now the content format is going to be one of 2 values. It's going to be Markdown or HTML. Either one's going to be a string. Now you might be wondering, how do I know that the value is going to be Markdown or it's going to be HTML? How do I know that the status of our article is public, draft, or unlisted, and that there are no other values? That's going to be in the documentation in Medium, in the Medium API. It's going to tell you what values it's expecting for the payload that it's receiving, the post body that it's receiving. And that gets us to title and content. And so let's think about this. The title and the content are values that are equivalent to whatever we wrote in our Kintone record. So we need some kind of a way to grab the value of whatever's in that title field and grab the value of whatever's in that body field, and then drop it in this title and content properties respectively. So to do that, we need to know a little bit about the way Kintone works. And so I'm going to give you a hand over here because I'm pretty sure you don't know this and you're not expected to know it. And I'm going to give you, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a window into how Kintone works. Okay. Well, we have an event object here. Remember I said that there could be useful pieces of data on that event object that Kintone exposes that we could use in our event callback function. And in fact, we're going to use them over here. That event object will give me access on a property called record, which we anticipated. And on that property called record, there will be a reference to our field codes. We have a field code title. We have a field code called body. And I hope that you remember that you were the one who chose those values when we were building this form. And I said, remember, these are case sensitive. They must be all lowercase. And we're putting them over here, title and body. But I got to tell you, that's not the whole story, because actually what we need is the value property on the title property, on the record, sorry, the value property on the title object, which is a value that lives on record, which is a property of the event object. And it's going to be something very similar over here. We've got event.record.body.value, and that's where we're going to get the data that we're looking for. You might wonder, how does my VS Code know that my object notation is incomplete over here? Do you see it's throwing me a record? It says type multi-line text is not assignable to type string. And the secret of why our IDE knows that this object notation is incomplete has to do with these custom fields. Okay, well, so far so good. I want to share what we've done so far. We've introduced you to TypeScript. We've specifically covered interfaces, which are a way of specifying object shapes. We engaged with Kintone's event handler to kick off some code when we land on the detail page. We clarified what the value of the post body object will be. We created a button, and we then defined the behavior on click, and then we attached that button to our blank space field. That's what we've done so far. We also messed around a little bit with the post medium API. We did this unsuccessfully. What I wanted to convey over here was that every function you can typecast the inputs and the outputs. And then I left as an open question, what is this Kintone custom fields business? Okay, so I'm going to pull the curtain back up a little bit. And I want to show you that we have a file over here called fields.d.ts. TypeScript knows that any .d.ts file is a place where we are defining types. And so what we've done is we've acknowledged that there is an object in the global namespace called Kintone. Okay? And that's a real deal. In fact, if we are in Kintone, we open up our console and we type in Kintone, hit enter, there is an object over here. It looks like that. It's got a bunch of stuff on it, blah, blah, blah. It's not undefined. So here in Kintone, there's some Kintone object and there's stuff happening over there. And what we've done in our code is we've said, hey, in a place that you don't have access to at the moment, trust us, there's an object called Kintone, and we're going to specify the field types that you can find that we will be using as interface types for our code. You'll notice we have two different interfaces. We have our system field, so every app in Kintone, even if you put no fields in it, will automatically have the following fields: your ID number, the revision number, who created it, who modified it, some timestamps, and what the record number is. You can't control that. Those are built-in system fields. But we did create some additional fields. We created a title and a body, and the title was a text field. The body was a text area field. There's two different kinds of fields. And we've used this code to define the types. Right? So TypeScript will know, based on the magic that's happening here and based on an additional package that we've run, that we've npm that we're using, that npm is using, called Kintone DTS gen. Okay? The magic over here has created us this fields file so that when we are in main, we can refer to the custom fields which were defined in this fields definition types file. And then and then our IDE knows to expect the shape of the object. So I've pulled back the curtain a little bit and I've explained to you the magic that's happening that allows TypeScript to know the object shape and would thus know that event.record.body, the value of it isn't a string and it's not null. Actually, it's an object. We're going to go ahead and save our work, and then we're done. So at this point in time, what we should expect to see is if we run npm start, the scripts that are loaded into our code will run VITE. VITE will eat the TypeScript file. It will spit out a JavaScript file. And in fact, you can see we have a new file. We have a new folder called dist with Kintone customization.js, and this is all JavaScript actually. Do a word wrap so you can see there's a bunch of stuff over here. Okay, and that got sent up to Kintone. In fact, I know this is true because if I refresh the page, click me to publish. This is exactly what we were expecting, right? If I change main.ts, if I change click me to publish and I say publish to medium, and I save, Kintone npm start, having watched for file changes, should upload. Oh, it doesn't look like it's doing that. Not a problem, we'll run it again. Here we go, npm start. We'll make that change. All right, deployment has been completed. Watching for file changes. Terrific. Let's refresh this page. And here we go, publish to medium. So I expect when I click on this button momentarily, I can then go to medium and I can see that I've published a post straight from Kintone. Let's take a look and see if we've done it. All right, well, I clicked on that button. I got a 201 response. which is great. 201 means the response has been submitted correctly. And then here's the data, a bunch of stuff. Now let's refresh Medium. My published stories, I've got one published stories. Wello, Pearl. Published 1 minute ago, this is the body, and that corresponds exactly to what we wrote over here. Talk about next steps, next ways to deepen your learning and understanding for this session. So first things first, here's one thing that you can do is you can disable the publish button based on the record status. In other words, if the process management status of the record is not completed, then the publish button should not work. And so the hint over here is we've got a native setting in Kintone called process management that you can check out and play. You can change the hard-coded tags into a Kintone API call. So for example, we hard-coded 3 tags, Kintone, medium, and low code, but what if you wanted to make your own tags? How would you do that? So you might create a field on Kintone, a multi-select field, and then hook the behavior into that. Refactor the code into a reactive stateful framework. See if you can use a tool like React or Vue to handle state. You can show a spinner when the API call is in progress. Notify the user when the upload fails and why, and then you can also use the Medium API and the Kintone attachment field to add images in the article. If you're stuck, then I encourage you to share your code on the Kintone developer program, the developer community forum.
And I just want to say thank you to all for your undivided attention during this workshop. We really appreciate it and just can't thank you enough. And we also want to say thank you to our community partners with HackBuddy by JavaScript LA. And if you guys enjoyed this workshop, well, good news for you. We have more future workshops coming up. They're about once a month. And if you want to figure out more of the times and dates for these, join at the meetup, bit.ly/KDP_events.
And at this point in time, we will go ahead and sign off for the evening. Thanks everybody for being with us, wherever you are around the world, whatever time it is. Take care and goodbye.